Before you start, let me know.
It's in the process of starting. Recording to some of them. We're live on 4 out of 5. Live on 5 out of 5.
Okay, we're going in. Let's try and do a little review of yesterday's class. A little complicated. So again, we're trying to understand the basic principle of na'utz techilasan b'sofan b'sofan b'techilasan, which means the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning is wedged in the end. And the idea here is that it can't go, the end can't at this point go higher than the beginning. Because it's sort of the principle of, we said like about the pipe that you can lift up on two sides, right? The water can't go higher on one side than it is in its source. There's a principle in the whole Seder Yishtalshlus that the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning in the end, but not higher. So yesterday we spoke a little bit more about that, and ultimately what we said was, in the origin of all creation, this is sort of a little review of the class before, like yesterday. In the origin of all creation, there's this initial Rahmanis that gets sort of aroused in the soul. Rahmanis, mercy. This then leads to, if you recall, a will, right, of like desiring to do good to the poor. The feeling of Rahmanis is sort of just like this essential tainug that the soul has of giving mercy, which then produces a will. We said then we went through the whole Seder Yishtalshlus. The will then produces an intellect in order to figure out how to carry out this will. The intellect then creates an emotional response to that intellect, which is followed by thought, speech, and then finally the action of giving the poor person the money. And we said this is the sof ma'aseh, this is the end of the deed. And the idea is that already in the beginning of the arousal of the mercy inside of the person's, the deep soul of the person, there's already an interest, and you can already say it's found to a certain degree, the final giving of the money to the poor person, because that's what the mercy is there for, right? It's sort of like incomplete unless that would happen, and therefore it's already lodged into the beginning. And simultaneously, at the end of the giving, we mentioned this idea that when a person gives tzedakah, he gets 6 blessings, and if he gives tzedakah with a piyus, which means like an appeasement and trying to help the person, he gets 11 blessings. So we said at the end deed, if you don't get down to those 6 blessings, you haven't really got to the end. But when you have the extra 5 blessings that are given to you for appeasing the person, you can make out inside of the end deed all the inner emotion and intelligence and will and pleasure, depending on the manner and the intensity of his appeasement of this person, that in the end deed, it wasn't just a deed. It didn't like cut itself off from all of its previous places. And on the contrary, if there wasn't a continuous flow and a line from that original will, it would have stopped at some point and not reached the deed. So certainly the beginning is also wedged in the end. Not only the fact that the end happens, there must be a join to the beginning, but also in the manner of the appeasement, you can actually make out some of that emotion and intelligence and even the original mercy. So the beginning is also wedged in the end. That was sort of a review of the class before last. So you understand? Remember that? Okay, let's say the Chaim start off on a good note. It's just coffee. Okay, now, yesterday, some of us didn't make it. It was a fast day. But we started on chapter 4 here. And we started to discuss, a little bit deeper, the notion that there's a reason there's different reasons for creation. Why did Hashem make the world, essentially, right? So who remembers the 2 reasons that we put on the table yesterday? Yes?
It's good for the brios, to do good for the brios.
Right. There's a concept of teva hatov lehetiv. It's the nature of good to do good. So Hashem wants to do good to his creation. That's why he created the world. He needs to do good, and he needed someone to do good too. And
to bring out the perfection of his powers.
I'm sorry?
To bring out the perfection of his powers.
Right. To his shleimus, his perfection, would be to bring his potential to actual. Right. If he doesn't be all that he can be, right? If there's aspects of God that have not yet been revealed, then Hashem is, so to speak, incomplete, and therefore he created the world and he brought out the existence in order to make himself whole, because without that there would have been a potential that was not actualized. This is what we started off saying. And then we started to explain that the reasons in the Kabbalah for these two different reasons of creation, in other words, where do these reasons for creations apply in the Seder Ishtalshlus? Does that make even sense, the question?
No.
Yeah? No? I'll try one more time. You were here yesterday, right?
What?
You were here yesterday? No. Okay, so let me try and just rephrase the question. There's different aspects of creation, right, down the line. Some that we just mentioned, that whole Seder Ishtalshlus. So the reasons of he wants to do good with his creation, or he wants to fulfill his potential into actual, those reasons like sit into a certain area of the Ishtalshlus. When you get to a certain point, we can apply this reason. When you get to a different point, we can apply this reason. So which reason goes with which point? That's the question from yesterday. If anyone, wise students who can remember that. Yeah, Yitzchak?
The outer reason, the more external reason that you want to express his greatness was first, it was Adam Kleinbaum, and then the other reason was after that, or lower than that.
Okay, I want to applaud you for an attempt. First of all, you mentioned something important. The outer reason and the inner reason. What is that? What do you mean the outer and inner reason? Because I didn't mention it, but you're right. Which one is considered the deeper inner reason, and what's more of an external reason?
So the deeper inner reason was that he wanted to be kind to his creations, and that's like the underlying, like the actual reason. And then the other one was just kind of to express his greatness was to get to that. It was like a more external reason. So it was able to get into the more internal, essential reason.
Good, so let's focus on that for a second, right? This whole idea that he wants to make himself whole and express himself. We actually said to a certain degree that there's a little inner contradiction in Hashem wanting to make himself whole and express himself. One second, before we get to that, I just want to repeat what you said so we're all on the same page. It's very complicated, by the way. So in my own mind, I'm trying to put it together in the simplest way to express it, and I'm realizing it's tricky. But as far as Hashem wanting to make himself whole, we said that the only reason he really wants him to make himself whole ultimately is in order to do good with his creation. In other words, that the inner reason of why there's anything is because he wants to do good. But therefore, he makes himself whole, right? Because he has to express himself and reveal himself. All of that is an attempt to try and do good with his creation. So the underlying ultimate reason that he made anything is because he wants to do kindness. But there's also a reason that he wants to express himself and make himself whole. But that itself is ultimately a subset of, he wouldn't have done that, in other words, unless he wanted to do good with his creation. So the real ultimate reason for everything is he wants to do good, and in order to do that, he has to reveal himself, and all of his powers have to come from potential to actual. That's what you're saying, right? But there's two problems with that, right? Noam, you want to say something?
The two problems.
Okay, tell me the two problems.
The first one is that from the perspective of God, potential is actual.
Okay, that's one problem.
And the second problem is that God's desire to do good to his creations is his will. And his desire to be complete, it's not even desire, that's above that, which is the opposite order of what's inner and outer.
Good. Let me clarify that statement. Excellent. By the way, there's not a microphone, is there, on that end?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because we're getting a lot of complaints. People want to hear you guys. They want to see you also, but I think...
Yeah, people speak up and then we can also...
Anyway, Noam just hit the proverbial nail on the head, but I want to clarify what he said for the rest of us. So I'm going to start actually with the second problem that you said first. According to the writings of the Kabbalah, of the Arizal, when it mentions, like I mentioned to you a moment ago, there's different places in the Seder Ishtalshlus where these different reasons apply. So who can tell me with one word, where is the application of the reason that he wants to do good with his creation? He wants to do good with his creation. Where does that sort of come up? And when the Arizal is busy describing how all things unfold from the Ein Sof until here, he gets to a certain point, and he says, and he did this because he wants to do good with his creation. Where did he get to? One word, akudim. Remember akudim? From yesterday, we spent a long time on it.
Yep.
Those who weren't here, it's going to be a little bit of probably a need for a review. But before we get to the review, akudim is basically, let's just simply say it's after the tzimtzum. Okay, so it's the first world which exists after the tzimtzum.
So it's Adam Kadmon?
It's Adam Kadmon, right? Yeah, akudim is for our conversation the same as Adam Kadmon, which we've discussed quite a bit in the past, so hopefully you're holding there. So this, it says in Kabbalah, that when he created Adam Kadmon, we could say that he wanted to do good with his creation. Before the Tzimtzum is the hispashtus and the revelation of what we call all the hishavus, all of being, basically, which is the Or Ein Sof came out. And at this moment, the Or Ein Sof comes out. This is where the Kabbalah mentions the reason that he wanted to make his potential actual, right? He wants to make all that could be potential, which is basically his essence, needs to shine. That already applies before you get to the Tzimtzum, right? Because the Ein Sof light that comes out is already something of an act of Hashem, and it already has to be explained as to why he did that. And he did that in order to make himself whole, right? So we apply the reason of bringing his wholeness and his potential to actual on the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, and we apply he wants to do good with his creation to the world of Akudim or Adam Kadmon, which is after the Tzimtzum. So far, you understand those words that I'm saying? One more time. Right? When he reveals his Or Ein Sof, we say, why did you do that, Hashem? Right? This is before there's a Tzimtzum of the Or Ein Sof. And we say, because I want to make myself whole. This is why I acted. I want to bring my potential to actual, which already can apply at the level of the Or Ein Sof. Then there's a contraction of the light, and he brings down the level of the Akudim or the Adam Kadmon. He creates basically this first source of, like what Noam called the will. I'm going to go with that for a second, why not? Of all the worlds that come afterwards, right? Which we said was all the lights in one vessel, right? And it's the beginning of essentially what will be the root of creation, because before the Tzimtzum was really before there's much creation to talk about. And there at that level, where he creates the Akudim, Adam Kadmon, what does he say? Why did you do that, Hashem? To do good with my creation. That's where the second reason comes in. He wants to do good with his creation. Teva hatov laheitiv. Now you might note, based on Yitzchak's point in the beginning of the class, and Noam pointed this out as well, it seems like they should be opposite, right? Because we said that the ultimate real reason for all things was what? What was the penimius, the inner dimension of the reason for all things? Yes? To do good to the creation. Why then does that only show up on the radar when you get to Akudim, right? Because the only reason we said that he even revealed his infinite light to begin with and shined the Or Ein Sof and brought existence into being even before creation was in order to ultimately do good with his creation. And yet we find that already at the Or Ein Sof level, it says another reason for creation, which is that he wanted to bring his potential into actual. Why did that happen before we got to Akudim, which was in order to do good for the creation, which really we said was the ultimate reason for everything to begin with? Before we move on, I just want to make sure everybody understands that it's complicated as can be. You getting that? Noam? Yeah. Yes? Okay, now the second thing that Noam just brought up is that saying that Hashem brought his potential into actual is anyway, and this actually should help the first understanding, right? Is anyway a very troublesome statement. Because there's a basic principle that was brought actually out in the Pardes, which was written by Moshe Cordovero in Sfas, we should always mention, right? The father of Kabbalah, that he says that Hashem's potential is not lacking its actual. That by Hashem, who like sort of sees all, there's no such thing as if he has something of potential, he has to become more whole by bringing it into actuality. And on the very opposite is true. The way it is by Hashem, his potential is so actual that any move from there would actually be like a step down, a contraction. The ultimate level that we mentioned about Hashem being whole is up inside of the place where all things are carried there in a way of nosei es hakol. He carries everything. We've used this language a few times, trying to kind of have you guys remember this one. That there's an idea of his koach going to poel, which is potential to actual, And the potential already contains the actual. And there's even a higher level of that same conversation where the potential is already actualized in another phrase where we say he's nosei es hakol. He carries everything inside of him. And again, the analogy that we use for this is the letters inside of the luchos. If you remember this analogy, we come back to it time and again, that there is such a thing as letters which are empty letters, right? The luchos was from side to side an absence. So what is the letter? What is the form of all reality and plurality? It's basically nothing. Inside of Hashem, all things will ever be are contained there in a way that they impose no duality or plurality or anything upon Hashem's essential oneness, because the nature of the things as they are there are in a state of zero sheba zero. And at that level, they're actually in their highest state of revelation because they're the perfect manifestation of all things that would be as they are inside of Hashem and His perfect oneness. There He carries everything. So for Him to then, so to speak, bring that out and show it, it's not a furtherance of His shleimus and His wholeness. It's actually just a dumbing down of the very power that He already has and sort of limiting its nature to being less godly than it was inside of Him. So therefore, the whole notion of bringing His potential to actual is not something that Hashem needs to do. It's only something that the world needs, because in our frame of reference, something which is only potential is lacking. Like I said yesterday, if a person has the ability to be a champion at birth, it's not enough, right? He has to bring that out of himself, and he has to undo his potential. Otherwise, he would have died not a champion, and that's a problem. So in the framework of creation, something which is left in potential is a problem. And therefore, we could say that yes, for us, Hashem did us a favor of bringing the potential into actual. But then that only goes back into proving what we said before, that the only reason for Him to do that would be for what? For Him to do good with His creation. Right? Because for Himself, He doesn't need to do that. And that's how we explained ultimately why that, even though it was sort of a precursor, the real inner reason for Him to bring His shleimus of His potential to actual, the ultimate reason behind that must have been to do good with His creation. This is like another proof of how we know that was a secondary external reason, because He doesn't have to do that for Himself, right? He only would do such a thing in order to do good for His creation. So even though we labeled that in the Or Ein Sof department, which precedes Akudim, where officially we say He's now doing good with His creation, nonetheless, even that original expansion of His potential into actual must have been only for our sake. And therefore, even at that level, the panemius reason is in order to do good for His creation. I think that's pretty much a summary of yesterday's class. How do you feel about that? You following along? All right, he's gonna make things a little bit more reasonable in a second. Quick question.
Is that really something like Hashem can do though? Because I was thinking potential to actual. It sounds like you're making something that's sort of independent, of yourself. House analogy that I see a lot. When you're thinking of building a house, that's potential, and when you actually build it, then that's actual, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you actually build a house, then it's not in your thought anymore. It's independent of it. So how can Hashem's constantly recreating the world with his thoughts and everything every second, and if He would stop and would all stop existing, so isn't that a constant state of potential in a way? You get what I mean?
But he doesn't have to stop thinking when he speaks or does, though, right? So you can leave it in the state of potential while He's actualizing it for you.
But from His perspective, it's always potential.
From His perspective, the potential is already actualized. In other words, it doesn't lack any fullness. On the contrary, it only lacks its luster when he takes it out of its perfected state and then shows it to you in your realm of understanding. That's actually lowering. In other words, when He takes those perfect letters of the Torah, let's say, as they are in a luchos form, you know what I'm talking about? Inside of the Or Ein Sof, and then He's going to bring them down and put them in on letters on parchment on a book for you. All He's done is He hasn't made the letters more actualized as far as He's concerned. He's actually concealed a certain luster and perfection of those letters by showing them to you. So it was already perfect, and fully actualized when it was in his thought. Right? It doesn't lack action because he didn't yet say it or do it as far as he's concerned. Only as far as you're concerned.
I guess it's just like from his perspective, like none of this like really exists, right? Like,
Or on the contrary, it exists like in its. Does the ray of the sun inside the sun exist? If it exists, says the Alter Rebbe, right, in the Tanya, if it exists all the way down in this world, it can shine into your window, then certainly it exists inside of its source, and even more so. It doesn't not exist inside the sun. It's just that since the sun is there, you don't call it by a name. But if you want to talk about the actual ray, the ray is more profound and brighter, or whatever it is. I know this doesn't exactly line up with modern physics and the understanding of light, but leave that on the side for a second. The analogy that he's trying to make is clear on its own standing, that there is a powerful ray inside the sun, which is even more real and more ray-like and more luster than it has when it comes into your window billions of miles away. So he's not lacking even the actualization of it. It's just that by him, the actualization of it is not such a big deal because in its state of potential, it's basically it's nullified entirely out of its expression. But he doesn't miss that expression. In other words, it's as real for him as it needs to be. Just take the analogy, the ray inside the sun. Is it there or not?
yeah.
And it's even there in a more profound way than it is for you. So when he brings it out and shows it to you, it looks like he's taking a potential into an actual, as far as you're concerned, because before you didn't see it, and only now you see it when it's come down so many levels. But the reality is that he had already the ray. In other words, for him to, so to speak, actualize it, which to us is this big deal of revelation, for him it's actually an act of concealment, because he has to take it out of its pristine form and let it be seen into your kelim. So that's the whole point we're trying to make, that actualization is not lacking when Hashem has it in potential, right? Okay, back to our plot. That's a good question. I'm trying to figure that myself in a much more broader sense of the question. Okay. We're on Os Daled, page 192. That much I can tell you. Okay. Let's take it from a little bit of back where we said yesterday so we can get a clean flow. So take it from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down from the top. We definitely did this, but we're going to just kind of hit it again real quick. It should be smooth. You have 192 there. Yeah? I don't. Oh, you have the wrong... Oh, because I made a new page. Sorry. You have an old one. Okay. Im Kain. You see that Im Kain there, everyone? After the parentheses? We just mentioned that as far as the Pardes is concerned, the potential is not lacking the actual. Im Kain, therefore, lo nisvasev shum shleimus chas v'shalom agdei gilui kochosav v'pulosav. Hashem actually does not add any wholeness to himself by revealing his powers. The Adarab, on the contrary, as we just mentioned with Josh a second ago, hashleimus lamayla hi masha etzem nosei asakol. His wholeness is that he carries everything inside of him, as we said a second ago, like the letters of the Luchos. In other words, that's even higher than as things are in potential. So, in other words, inside of Hashem's infinite light, he's already describing the existence of all things at slightly different levels. There's the level called, what I was calling the Luchos, where he carries everything. There's even a little bit something else like that, where he can actually bring it into potential, which is a step outside of the Luchos that knows the letters somewhat come into a little bit more expression, but even then, they don't lack in any sense their actualization. So there's the Nosei Asakol, and even on a slightly lower level, there's the idea of his koach, his potential, which is already actualized. But the point is that certainly he's not lacking anything by bringing a potential to actualization outside of himself. Therefore, what is the need for him to reveal all these powers? Rak bishvil bruyav. It's only for his creation. By us, as we said just now, there's definitely a difference if he leaves it in potential or he shows us it in actuality. So again, Nimtza comes out. Therefore, the Hashem's will, so that we should know that he is merciful and kind, etc. In other words, revealing all of his powers. Hu kedei lehetiv libruav. Also, that is only in order to do kindness with his creation. So again, the first reason, which comes first in, so to speak, time, in chronology, is that he wants to fulfill his powers, but even that is really only because he wants to do good with us, because he doesn't have to do it for himself. He doesn't need to reveal his powers. They're already revealed. Amnam, av shepinimiyas hatam di'izgalu shleimus kochosav v'di'ishtamudin le hu bichdei lehetiv libruav. I think this is where we got up to yesterday. Nonetheless, even though the inner reason of him revealing these powers, in other words, the reason of the Kabbalah that he should be known, is really in order to do kindness for his creation, like Yitzchak said in the very beginning of the class. There's the inner reason for revealing his powers is really he wants to do good with creation. Here we're going back to one of Noam's original questions. Why is it then, when Kabbalah is explaining the reason why Hashem does this, the reason why Hashem does this, why only when he gets to the level of akudim and not higher than this does it say he wants to do good with his creation? If already the real reason of him revealing the Orein Sof even before the Tzimtzum was ultimately to do good for his creation, because we had just proved that otherwise there's no reason for him to do it, he doesn't have to do it for himself, then why don't we hear that reason in Kabbalah assigned to a higher place? We only hear it when Hashem gets to the level of akudim, he wants to do good for his creation, and not higher than that. And the answer is, in akudim hu k'moshe kasuv ba'otzros chaim, the concept of akudim, as it says elsewhere in the Kisvei Arizal, shesham yischil hisgalus hakelim. Why does he wants to do good for his creation only come up on the radar when you get to akudim? Because there it begins the revelation of what we call kelim. Bichdei sheyuchlo ha'olamos lekabel ha'aros ha'ein sof, and you need a kli in order for the world to actually experience a ray of the Ein Sof, and to know that he is merciful and he is kind, right? In other words, why does he wants to do good for his creation appear on the screen only at akudim? Someone tell me, I just said it?
That's only when we're able to see it.
What's that?
That's only when we're able to see it.
That's when there's kelim, exactly. That's the only time when there's a concept of doing good for his creation, that the creation can actually know that he's kind, the creation can know that he's chanun. Right? What does the word chanun mean? Graceful. He shows us grace, which is, in other words, revealing his powers. Because without some kind of a receptacle, what creation are you doing good with? Right? There's no one to experience any of that. So we can only assign, he wants to do good with his creation when he forges the origin of what might be called a creation. Don't forget, this is a very highfalutin type of creation where all lights are inside of one vessel. It's far, far from what we would call normal creation. But at least it's something we can say, why did he do it? Right? Why did you make vessels? And which would ultimately be responsible for making things, because you want to do good with those things. So we assign the reason, it's only possible to assign that reason then. That's when we can at least openly say that he wants to do good with his creation. It's true that in a Temimei inner sense, he already wanted to do good with his creation long before that, but we couldn't actually say he wants to do good with his creation because there was no creation to speak of. Before he brings out akudim, there's no vessel, receptacle to receive any of this goodness. There's no one to receive the light. And not only that, but even if there was a vessel, the light is so powerful at that level before the Tzimtzum that even if there was a vessel, which by definition there's no one that could receive such a light. Therefore, at least in an open way, to say, why did you do that? Why did you create the Orein Sof, Hashem? We can't really let out of our mouths, even though there's a hidden intention, we can't openly say to do good with your creation, because that's not good with any creation, right? It's a light which no creation can experience, and it's a light which, even if there was a creation, it couldn't experience such a light. So we can't all of a sudden say, you made the Orein Sof, that was nice of you, we really appreciate it. There's no we, and there's no appreciation.
There's no other point to making it.
So in a panemius, no, there is, right? You could say that he did something else. He revealed his powers.
To who?
Okay, but the fact is that they're in a state of revelation as opposed to a state of concealment. To no one, but the point is that there's no creation to discuss at this point yet. But at least he pulled off an interesting trick, right? That there's there's something called concealment and revelation. Without that stage, we wouldn't have known that Hashem could do that. Why did you do that, Hashem? There's no creation.
But there wouldn't be any other point. Like the whole point of revelation, like revealing it to something, you know. Like
I can't argue with you because his whole premise here is that the only reason he did that is because there was an inner desire which not yet been sort of vocalized. Which the only reason we can explain why he would do that is to do good with the creation. But we can't actually say that at that point because there's no creation. He didn't do any good with any creation at that level. Right? At that stage of revelation, it's not relevant to say, I'm doing good with creation because nothing can experience it. It's true that when at a later stage, when it kind of comes down to a point where he makes the kelim, then we can openly see, he's doing good with his creation. And therefore we can retroactively realize, why did you do this thing in the first place when it wasn't necessary for you? And so there's a hidden agenda. But it's a hidden agenda. That's what he's trying to say. The Kabbalah does not come out and say Hashem revealed the Or Ein Sof because he wanted to do good with his creation. It says Hashem brought out the Or Ein Sof because he wanted to bring his potential to actual. That's the reason that's given. And I guess the reason that they don't say otherwise is because you would read it and then you would raise your hand and say, what good did you do with any creation if you just brought out the Or Ein Sof, right? I can't win with you. But that's why he can't really say that there. It's not appropriate to say you're doing good with any creation at that particular stage. V'lechein.
What is Or Ein Sof exactly?
What is it?
Infinite divine light.
It's the infinite divine light.
So it's already though like a revelation of Hashem in a certain way though?
Because in theory, there's an essence of God which precedes his shining of that light. Right?
So it's before the Tzimtzum.
So anyway, there's no tzimtzum. There's no tzimtzum before that. The tzimtzum only happens after the light comes. Then the tzimtzum is the light gets attached back inside of his essence and disappears again. But the idea of that Hashem could, like we talk about, like the ball of the sun versus the shine that comes out of the sun, right? So Hashem does not have to shine. He could just be essential, and actually it's kind of requires a reason. Why did you reveal yourself, even though you didn't reveal yourself to anybody, right? Because you revealed yourself with a light which is comparable to you, right? Every light that comes off of a luminary, it's compared to the luminary. Since this luminary is essence of God, even the light comes off is essence like light, and therefore it doesn't allow for the existence of any other being. So there's a question: why did you do that? And you say because what was in potential, it should be actual, right? Now, even though there's the questions on that, at least there's some kind of a reason just for that.
So I thought that when they said Or Ein Sof, we're talking about the actual essence of Hashem. That's not the actual.
No, the Ein Sof is the essence of Hashem.
You're insisting-
The Or Ein Sof is the light that comes off the Ein Sof, right? Important distinction. Okay, fine. Back inside. Fine. Let's get to this word lechein. Ready? Everyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines up from the bottom. Right in the middle, there's a lechein after a period. See that? V'lechein b'darga zu nemar hatam dilagalos shleimos kochosav. And that's why at that level, we only employ the reason that he wants to make himself whole, bring his potential into actual. Ki darga zu hi kavar la'achrei amshacha v'yetzi min ha'etzem. And why? Hang on, you're going to miss your question. Because this level is relevant because he's already made a drawing forth and a yetzia, like an exit from his etzem. Something did happen there. The fact that he revealed the infinite light already requires an explanation. Why did you do that? So we can't say anything about creation yet. You're all by yourself. But we're going to say because you want to, you did something. You're revealing something from potential to actual. Sharei etzem. Now here's the thing. He is actually answering a little bit of our puzzling matter about why would it be relevant to say that you revealed potential into actual when your potential is already actual for you? Because he's remember that question we brought up a few times? He's saying because when it comes to the etzem itself, the praise that you give to this etzem is that, and its shlemus is that it already carries everything within inside of it. This is the luchos, the letters of the luchos that I was describing to you. Inside of the essence, right? Its praise is not that Hashem shows his actual from his potential. That's not what we say over there. Because at that level, it's not relevant to say such a thing. He's already whole just by carrying everything as it is at that essential level of carrying all things inside of his essence. So there's no, it would be totally inappropriate to say you've made yourself whole by revealing your potential into actual. Not at the level of essence. But when he then reveals the infinite light from his essence, right? I kind of so in the essence, there's two ways of understanding it. We're going to clarify a few things here. Stay with me. Inside the essence is when it's relevant to say either Hashem carries everything, like I just mentioned, or Hashem's potential does not lack his actual. That whole conversation that we said before, that Hashem's perfection is that it doesn't lack any need to actualize. It's already there, like the ray of the sun inside the sun. It's already more of a wholeness than it is when it gets into your window. All that is inside of the essence of Hashem. And that is not the place where we are assigning this reason that you brought your potential into actual. No one's just giving a reason for Hashem's essential being. He's there. No one has to give a reason why Hashem is there. And when Hashem is there and all potential things are already actualized or even higher, he carries everything as he is. No reason. Hashem's busy doing his own thing. But when Hashem then has an exit and he brings the Or Ein Sof out and shines it, then we have to say, what's the reason for that? And at that level, maybe it's already a situation where his actual and his potential have been divided into two things. And there we want to say, there it's relevant to say, Hashem has shown his potential to become actual, right? So in other words, the whole disproof of this entire statement that Hashem doesn't need to make his potential into actual, it's like a misnomer by Hashem. That's not really true. It's only true when you are looking at the essence. In the essence of Hashem, there's this domain where it's irrelevant to say that he has to make himself whole by actualizing. But once he brings the Or Ein Sof out, just like at that original level, you can't say he wants to do good for his creation. He hasn't done anything yet. There's no assigning reasons for anything at that essential point. But once he brings the exit, let's look inside. Once he comes out of the essence, shines the light out of the sun, now he has this new concept that he's revealing the wholeness of his powers from potential to actual. He does it. He doesn't have to, right? But he does something, whereas all that infinite light, which was potentially inside of him, he now decides to reveal it. What's the reason for doing that? We have to say that you wanted to actualize a potential. And yes, not for you, but you have the capacity and the capability of taking something which is in potential for others and actualizing it. That's what we're going to assign right there at the level of the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. You get that? Done? Okay. But at that level, as we've already discussed, it's not relevant yet to say that he wants to do good for his creation. Because you didn't get to any kelim yet, you didn't get to the akudim. What creation, you would ask? And only after he makes the level of akudim, this world of all lights in one vessel, Adam Kadmon, where the vessels first get revealed, then that hidden concept of him wanting to do good with his creation can actually be stated openly. Here's a creation at least, or some form of a high level creation. Now we can say, why did you do it? I want to do good with my creation. Amnam, Tachlis ha'in d'lehetiv libruav, the real purpose, right, of doing good with his creation, shezeu techilasan, which is really, really the ultimate beginning, as we've been saying, because in a penimius way, even the revealing of his Or Ein Sof, its inner reason was really in order to do good with his creation. Harei zeh na'utz besofan dafka. So in other words, the real reason of him wanting to do good with his creation, even though it sort of shows up at the level of a kudim, it's not going to really show up until he gets to the literal end of the creation. Because the beginning, which is, what's the beginning? I want to do good with my creation. That beginning even really started before he even revealed the Or Ein Sof, because it was the reason for the Or Ein Sof to come out in the first place. And we're saying that it finally shows up when he gets to a kudim, you want to do good with your creation? That's not really where it shows up. It's only the first time you're able to say such a thing. But when you can really say, I want to do good with my creation, it's only when you get to the end. You have to actually make the creations. At that point, there's no creations. It's all infinite light inside of one keli. There's no thing at all. So it's only when he's going to actually make creations. Not creations as they are at the level of a kudim, which is just the next page, Haschalas his galus akeli, which is the beginning of the firming up of vessels. But rather, creations as they are actually in the need of experiencing Hashem's mercy and grace, right? There's no need for Hashem's mercy, but why did Hashem reveal His powers, His rachum v'chanun, His mercy? Because He wants to give them to creation. It's not relevant really to reveal His mercy and grace to a creation as it is in the realm of akudim. There's no one needing mercy and grace at that level. Right? You have to get into a situation where you're helpless, empty, and lacking everything in order to actually experience Hashem's mercy and grace. What is Hashem's mercy and grace? His original revelation of His kochos. The Or Ein Sof, that He can actually have characteristics and even be revealed. Why did He do it? Because He wants to do good with creation. It's not relevant at that point. It's not even relevant at a kudim. It only becomes relevant to do good with a creation when the creation is its actual existence, and it's a creation which lacks everything and needs rachum v'chanu.
We're the only ones who really need that, though.
That's why the beginning is wedged in the end. Lo rak asiya de klalus, and he says he has to get all the way down to the world of asiya, and not only asiya de klalus. What's asiya de klalus, Noam? Atzilus. Shezeu olam atzilus, elegam asiya pratis, but even mamish, the lowly level of asiya, the one we live in, olam hazeh atachtun she'en tachtun lamata mimenu, the lowest world that there's no other world like it. In other words, that's where you can truly show His mercy and His rachum v'chanun. Sham dafka na'ut techilas, and there specifically is where the beginning is wedged, right? So not only the beginning, which is akudim, but the beginning, which is even the Or Ein Sof, and even before the Or Ein Sof, there was like an intrinsic need to give mercy, which was the reason why the Or Ein Sof even came out in the first place. The hidden reason for His revealing of His powers was that intrinsically He wanted to do good with His creation. That's a very high level of a beginning. It's a beginning which we couldn't even articulate until we got to akudim. And it certainly doesn't come relevant until we get all the way down to here. But once it gets all the way down to here, it's actually the ultimate representation of a very, very high and lofty beginning, which preceded even the revelation of the Or Ein Sof. It was the reason for the revelation of the Or Ein Sof. So guess what? The end gets to a pretty high level of beginning. That's what we're trying to say. And yet, not beyond the beginning, right? This is our whole conversation is we're still in this havamina, that you can't get beyond the beginning, but we're just pointing out how very high you can get, which is called the beginning. It even precedes the revelation of the Or Ein Sof, right? Because there was an intrinsic tainug. I'm not going to call it will, because will is already when it comes out. But it's an intrinsic pleasure that He wants to have a will, which is called revealing the Or Ein Sof, in order to ultimately have that pleasure satiated by actually giving to the poor. And this ultimately, when you get to the lowest world, it's rooted in the beginning, which is this will and pleasure to reveal His powers, i.e. the Or Ein Sof. You even get back to the original concept of I want to give to my creations, which is the hidden reason even for revealing his powers. And this is al derech mashinis bar le'el. This is just like we said in the previous class when we gave a more physical and normal analogy. Be'inyan hisodorus rachmim pshutim, when a person, a rich person, will be aroused intrinsically with a deep soul level mercy that he wants to give to the poor. He's never going to, which is, right, we said that's the tainug, which leads to the ratzon, to the will, which leads to the intellect, to the emotions, to the thought, to the speech, and the action. We said you can only really trigger that will, that original tainug, when he actually gives, and he gives with an appeasement, and the 11 brachas come out. That's when he's able to essentially reach back to that original arousal of mercy inside of his soul. It's the exact same thing we just described on a much more grandiose scale. This is just like giving to the poor and the arousal of the will to do good with him, and it only comes out after the hashpah of chesed actually takes place. Whew, okay, where are we holding here? Just about the end. Everybody understand any questions at this point in time?
I had a question with the Or Ein Sof. I mean, there's not really like a point, because when you get back to the Ein Sof, everything like exists in actuality, potential, or like not even relevant terms really. So what exactly? There's not really like a. How can you say there's not really like a creation point of the Or Ein Sof, or like a what
the Or Ein Sof or the Ein Sof?
The Or Ein Sof. I mean, like where's that like turn of events happening if there's no other observer at that point except the Ein Sof, like, and everything's this actual potential. Like, what exactly is happening?
Think about for a second if you wanted to think about yesterday. Go ahead, think about yesterday. So what happened just now? You just had a revelation of something which is essentially inside of yourself, which no one else can see but you, right? But something took place. You already had that memory. If you didn't, you wouldn't be able to conjure it up, right? But when you conjured it up, you sort of went into a different dimension where you put that memory on the screen of your consciousness, right? What did you need it for? Really, you're going to say, for yourself, you didn't need it. Right? But in theory, you're going to want to tell somebody that memory, or you're going to want to write down your memoirs. So the only reason to do it would be to basically, it's already sent out. The truth is, the only reason you want to do it is because it gives you some pleasure to do that. And the pleasure is going to be with the sof maisa. Like whatever you intended in your deep inner will, which is sort of beyond description of why you would want to bring up that memory. In this case, you wanted to bring it up because I asked you to. But the fact that you could, the very bringing up of the memory in itself was already maybe the sof maisa. Or no, look, it led to this whole conversation, a deeper understanding. You're going to wind up giving tzedakah to the poor from this memory. But the point is, when you get, you can see that there's an exiting of the essence which doesn't go to anyone else. It only goes to yourself. Unless you want to continue down the path. And quite frankly, the only reason you would, if you were God, you would do that to begin with, is because you want to continue down the path and actually create a world which can then experience that and then gain your beneficence.
So it's some kind of like bringing into focus of the thing that's like not shy until it goes out.
Bring it into consciousness.
Yeah.
Why do we call it Hashem's will? When you have a will, nobody sees it except for you. But it's the beginning of activating external reality. Okay, one more question.
So we're saying that Hashem's original will in the beginning was to show mercy, rachmim, and everything. But then didn't we say also that the world he wanted to originally create with din, and that he also gets the most enjoyment from having us in gullus, not getting us revelation, and us doing things without revelation, like doing mitzvahs without getting any like experience from it.
In other words, but that would be the ultimate mercy. Hashem didn't want to create the world with din to hurt us. He wanted to create the world with din to give us the ultimate reward. Because if we could figure this thing out by ourselves, it would be the best possible thing that could ever happen for him and for us. Problem is, we need training wheels. So he brought out that din to create a world which was absence of him, so we would find him and get all the reward, right? We couldn't find him. We would have we tried. It didn't work out. So he had to basically send us tzaddikim and Torah and miracles, which is like training wheels, So then but then he removed them. He sort of, at one point, he was going to take the training wheels off, which is basically after the miracles sort of disappeared from our nation's history in an open way, open prophets and so forth in the way that they once were, so that we could have the experience back of doing it on our own. And this is what the thing. Everyone say, I want, Mashiach now. They want someone to come down from heaven and just be Mashiach for them. That's like Hashem said, I don't want that for you, my children. I want better for you. I want you to do it yourself. Right? So that the whole idea is that the platform is, you got to do this yourself. And that is the ultimate kindness. So it's not rachum v'chanun. That is rachum v'chanun. In other words, the same thing applies in tzedakah, by the way. The greatest thing you can do for a poor person, like you, I think you said, was give it to him in a way he doesn't realize it, or give him a job. Ultimately, giving him a job is the biggest form of tzedakah, which means you're not giving him anything. You're like, you do it. And that is of all ranking of all the different forms of tzedakah. That's the highest form you can give. Before he even falls, you basically set him up with a self-preservation mechanism.
So thank God we merited the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash.
That's what we say.
Then we have the opportunity to do it on a higher level.
It's exactly what it says in Chassidus. That if the Beis Hamikdash was there, it would be standing in the way of the third Beis Hamikdash, right? Because we need three. So the fact, if one of them is there or a second one is there, it's a long haul. That's why Rabbi Akiva laughed, when he was standing on the place, because he said, now I know that the final prophecy will be fulfilled. As long as the second temple was standing, how do I know if there's going to be a destruction and a rebuilding?
Why ask for Mashiach? Why not just?
What you're asking for Mashiach is that it should come out of you, really. That's what the Rebbe is saying. When people said, Rebbe, I want you to be Mashiach, this heartbroken woman came in line for dollars. It's on video. You can see it. She's saying, she's like, Rebbe, you're Mashiach. Don't tell them, leave it to us. You're Mashiach. And Rebbe got angry, visibly angry with her. And he said, Mashiach will come when you're Mashiach and you're Mashiach. He started pointing to everyone in the room and saying, you're Mashiach. He's like, stop this. You don't get what I'm trying to say. When we want Mashiach, because we want Am Yisrael Chai to rise up and mamish be mature, we can do this without miracles. That's the funny thing. We're like the most amazing people on earth, just naturally, right? So let's get it on. Proud of ourselves, and we don't have to be afraid of giants. We can just go ahead and do it. We have Hashem has our back.
Rabbi, where